Okay, so we are going to wrap up our unit on quadratics at the end of next week. I told you guys the test was on the 4th. I also planned that when I completely forgot that you guys were going on freshman retreat. So the test is not in fact the 4th. The test is going to be the 7th. So that means your homework is due the 7th. Okay, so the 7th I believe is next Friday. Yeah. So your test is going to be next Friday. We're going to do a review on Thursday, and then we're going to do a review activity, which I think I am 97% sure if I can get my act together on the computers for it that we will do a different activity. If not, we'll Kahoot, but I think we will do a different activity. So you will do this lesson today. We have 2 more lessons, and then we'll review. Okay, because I won't see you tomorrow. And then we'll have another lesson on Monday, another lesson on Tuesday, and then we'll review on Thursday, and your test will be Friday. Which means, again, if you have still not done any of your homework, you will have 9 assignments that are due on Friday, because there's 9 assignments in this unit, okay? So if you have not taken advantage of the fact that you have had very little school this week and caught up on your homework, I suggest doing that soon, okay? All right, so what we're going to talk about today is solving quadratics when we are using square roots. But before we do that, what is a square root? What's a square root? Or let me ask this question. What's the square root of 25? 5. So how come everybody can answer that?
Because you know the square root because it's the number that multiplies by itself.
Okay, the number that multiplies by itself, right? So what's the square root of 64?
8.
What's the square root of 81?
9.
What's the square root of 144?
12.
Square root of 100? 10. Square root of 75. Why are we being quiet?
Because nothing multiplies by itself to get you 75.
Does nothing multiply or just not a whole number?
No.
Not a whole number. Okay, so 75 has a square root, right? But it's not a whole number. So how can we figure it out? You can. There's 2 different ways you can do it. You can do it on your calculator, or we're going to talk about a way at the end, like at the halfway point, of a different way to estimate it. But on your calculator, does everybody know how to take a square root? If you need a calculator, go grab one. When you get it, make sure it's in classic mode. So change your mode. If it's in math print, change it to classic. Okay, so everyone go to mode, make sure you're in classic, and then go ahead and take the square root. So to do that, hit second, and then the x squared button, which should give you the little radical symbol, which looks kind of like a division sign, but with a little check mark. Okay? So then type 75, close parentheses, and take the square root of 75. Round it to 2 places, what does that give you? Joanna? 8.66. Good, 8.66. So you're taking the square root, so to do that again, you're hitting second, and then you're hitting the x squared button, which is on the left side, 4th button up, and that's going to give you the square root. So if I multiplied 8.66 times 8.66, it would give me approximately 75. Now, 8.66 is rounding, right? Because really, if I take 75, does that decimal stop? No. Not only does it not stop at 8, like it says on this calculator, but it actually never stops. It's a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal, which means it doesn't have a pattern, and it goes on forever, but we just can't fit any more numbers on our calculator. So we round it to 8.66. So try doing 8.66 times 8.66 and tell me what you get.
Mine got exactly 75.
Oh, because you had second answer times second answer.
74.99.
Okay. All right, so for anybody else who did what I actually said to do, what did you get? 74.9956, which is approximately 75. Okay, so again, it's not going to give you an exact, but it's an approximation. So that's how you can do it on your calculator. So we'll do that a couple times because we'll need to do it. However, before we even start, square rooting is the opposite of what? Squaring. So that's why it's on the button that it's on the calculator, because what does the x squared button do?
Square.
Gives you an exponent of 2. which, by the way, every quadratic has an exponent of 2. Good. So we're going to talk about how to solve problems involving square roots. But before we do that, tell me this. How would I solve this problem that's up here right now? 2x plus 3 equals 11. How would I solve that?
First you put it in standard form.
Well, it's just a linear function, so how would I solve this?
First you do minus 3
So the first thing I want to do is subtract 3.
from both sides.
Why? Somebody besides Brendan, why am I subtracting 3?
What you do to one side, you do to
Okay, you have to balance it, so whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side of the equal sign. But how come minus 3 and not plus 3 or times 3 or Rodrigo? I'm trying to get x by itself, and what am I trying to get rid of here?
the 3.
And so I use a minus 3 because the 3 was a
Positive.
plus 3, so to cancel it out or to get rid of it, I do the opposite. Very good. So I do the opposite. So now I got to do the opposite one more time. So what do I do?
Divide by 2.
Divide by 2, because what is 2x really? What kind of math?
Multiplication.
This is multiplication, so to get rid of it, I divide. So then x is going to give me 4. Perfect. Okay, so that's just basic two-step algebra, right? We've been doing that since August. You guys have probably been doing that since 6th or 7th grade. So if we throw in an x squared, the only thing that's important to remember is just like the opposite of multiplication is division, what's the opposite of squaring something?
Square root.
Square rooting it. So when you need to get rid of an exponent of 2, what do you do to both sides?
Square root.
Square root both sides. Exactly. So when we're getting rid of stuff in algebra, we do the opposite, and squaring and square rooting are the opposite of each other. So you get rid of a square by square rooting. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Okay, good. So then, if I have this, x squared equals 16, you could probably guess and tell me what x is, which is what?
8. I mean,
4. Okay. Or, if you didn't know that off the top of your head, if I want to get rid of an exponent of 2, what do I do? What's the opposite of an exponent of 2?
The square root.
Square root. So I take the square root of this side, but if I square root this side, what do I have to do here?
Square root of the
Okay. All that happens here is a square root and a square do what? Cancel out. So all you're left with is x, and then what's the square root of 16? 4. If you aren't sure, do it on your calculator. Okay, if it's something that's not a whole number, do it on your calculator. Alright? There's two kind of tricky things though. Because does it have to be positive 4? No? What could it also be? Why? Diego?
It could be negative or times negative.
Yeah, because what does that still give you?
A positive.
A positive 16. So whenever you take the square root, it's not just 4, it's negative 4 or positive 4. And the shorter cut way of writing that is plus or minus 4. Okay? So plus minus means it could be either of those. So rather than writing negative 4 or positive 4, you've got plus or minus 4. Which is exactly why a quadratic usually has how many answers? 2. Because there's 2 answers here. So it would cross the x-axis at negative 4 and positive 4. So that's where our parabola would be. Okay? So that's one kind of tricky thing. When you take a square root, it's got to be plus or minus 4. The other thing is, can you take the square root of a negative? Go ahead and try it on your calculator right now. Try the square root of negative 4. What does it tell you?
Domain error.
Domain. It says domain error. What does that mean? Brennan?
So wait, so domain is like the x.
Uh-huh.
So like it's an arrow on the x.
There's an error with your x, right? Where there's an error with your x because, in fact, there is no x. Because can you multiply the same number times itself and get a negative? No, because a positive times a positive gives you a positive, and a negative times a negative gives you a positive, and if a negative times a negative gives you a positive, if I change one of the signs, are the numbers the same anymore? No, so it's not a square. Okay? So you can never get a negative, which means this would be a what?
Final answer.
Sort of.
No solution.
No solution. This would be a no solution. You cannot do it. Nothing will ever equal a negative, okay? So this cannot be negative over here. What if this were negative x squared equals negative 4? Then what could you do?
Right now,
This would work, but what do I have to do first with that negative sign? Get rid of it? How do you get rid of a negative sign here? Divide by a, not a positive, negative 1. Because dividing by negative 1 does what to my negative sign? Gets rid of it, but it doesn't change the x squared. And then over here, what would it do? Make it positive. Good. So if a negative x squared equals negative 4, then a positive x squared equals positive 4. Okay, so this is when there's no solution. So just remember, you cannot get a negative in your answer. All right, so how do we use that to actually solve some of these problems? So let's take a look at this one. Before I start it, what do I need to do? Where do I need to get x squared? I'm trying to isolate x, right? So I need to get x where? By itself. So what do I have to get rid of? How do I get rid of a plus 5? And what do I end up with here? X squared equals 0. And now I still have to isolate x further because it's an x squared. How do I get rid of a squared? Square root. And if I square root here, what do I do here? What do I get here? X. And then what's the square root of 0? 0. So x has to equal 0. Okay? So we're going back to very basic algebra, right? We're going back to 1 and 2 step algebra problems where you're doing the opposite. The only thing is we have a new opposite to do. Okay? And the only difference is when you get down to x squared by itself, you take the square root. Because a square and a square root are opposites. They're inverse operations, just like multiplication and division. What about this one? What do I do first? Add 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides, plus 25, plus 25. And then what do I end up with here? 25. Now what?
Square root it?
Not yet.
You gotta handle the variable.
I got to handle the coefficient. How do I get rid of a 4 here? Divided by 4, divided by 4. And what do I have left here? X squared. Okay, now you've got a couple options. You can do this on your calculator and get a decimal, or you can be lazy like me and you can leave it as a fraction. 25 over 4. Last step is to do what? Square root of not just one side, but both sides. X squared square rooted equals x. And now here, square root of a fraction means I just take the square root of both. And these are both perfect squares, right? So what would that give me? 5 over 2. And from there, you can do it as a decimal or you can just leave it. Okay? Again, I'm going to leave it, but if you like things as decimals, it would be 2.5. This 2 goes into 5 twice with half left over. Okay. Questions? That's it for this part. Yeah. So questions on what we just did. What's the opposite of squaring?
Square root.
If you square root one side,
You gotta square root
square root the other. For some reason, people see this and they think you have to do some type of crazy math. Remember, this is just the opposite. So all that does is what? The whole point of doing it is to make the squared go where? Away. Disappear. Okay? So if you're looking at this thinking, oh, that looks really complicated, that's not. That's the easy part. Because that just disappears. If you've got a square and a square root, they're just gone. Okay. Yes.
Go back to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so 2.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to do this because I think we need to get to it. Okay. What if instead of using your calculator, you want to do this in your head? So how would I do A? Square root, and then x equals the square root of 10, right? And I don't want to do it on my calculator, because maybe I don't have it and the batteries are dead or whatever. Alright? Does anyone have a guess on what the square root of 10 is?
2.
Like 4 point.
Okay, I think it's bigger.
Yeah, 3.
Why do you say 3.5?
Because 3 was 9.
3 times 3 is 9, so it has to be bigger than 3, right? But 4 times 4 equals, so it has to be smaller than 4. So it's got to be somewhere between 3 and 4. Diego?
3.3.
It's probably going to be a little closer to 3 because 9 is close to 10. So the way you do it is you say, and I think we did this way back when, but just as a review, the way you do this is you say, okay, 10 is between what two perfect squares? 9 and 16, right? Which one's it closer to?
9.
So it's probably somewhere here, like closer to 9. What's the square root of 9?
3.
What's the square root of 16?
4.
So it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 4, probably like 3.2 something, 3.3. All right, do it on your calculators now. Oh, I was too high.
It's like 3.1.
3 point,
I got
3.16, 3.16, yeah. So it's approximately 3.16. Alright, so 3.16. Now you're probably thinking, why do I care? Why can't I just do it on your calculator? And you can. Okay, for the most part you can, except the part on the quiz or test where I say approximate this using your brain. Okay? You can always check it on your calculator, that's fine. But you need to show me like which ones it would be between. Okay? What would I do here in B? This one looks different because the x squared is on the right, but it doesn't change anything. What do we still need to get rid of?
The 80.
The 80 and
The x squared.
the square and the coefficient, right? So which one do we start with?
Minus 80.
Minus 80 because it's the farthest away. So minus 80. And that gives you negative 80 over here, right? What do I have left here?
Negative 2x.
What do I do next?
You divide by negative 2.
And that gives me
40.
x squared equals 40. And it's a good thing these were both negative, because if that gave me a negative, my answer would have to be what?
No solution.
No solution, if this were negative. Now from here, what do I do? Square root, x equals, okay, what square roots is 40 in between? What perfect square roots? What's the closest square root you can think of that's a perfect one? 6 and 7. What's 6?
36.
And what's 7?
49.
49. So it's somewhere between there. Which one's it closer to?
49. I mean,
It's a little closer to 36 because it's 4 away from 36. So that means it's a little bit closer to 6. So it might be something like 6 point, let's go with 6.3 on this one. Check it on your calculator.
Yeah,
Good. 6.32. Good. To me, this part is like icing on the cake. This part, if you're good here, this is what I really care about. I'm never taking your calculators away. So if you can't, like, if this is just, I don't know what you just did over there, this to me is the important stuff, that you're using the opposite, okay? So even if you end up using your calculator to do it and you're not quite sure how to approximate, that's okay with me, all right? Because again, I'm not taking your calculators away. But you're only as good as your calculator, remember that. So if you don't know how to cancel out a squared by using a square root, you're gonna have a lot of problems, okay? All right, questions? I would like you to do at your boards any 4 of these. Just try any 4, but I'm gonna call it in 5 minutes so you can do your exit ticket, so try to work quickly.